Good afternoon. Excuse me. It's Wednesday, the 15th of July 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson.
Afternoon.
Well, here we are. It's not too bad at all in Plymouth. Bit of sun starting to peep through. The forecast is not brilliant, but we're quite happy. A few people pointing out to us that it's St Swithin's Day. So if you're a big St Swithin's Day fan, it's the day for you. What's happening in UK at the moment? From bad to worse, I think.
Indeed.
With a big smile on our face. It had to happen before it could get better. Well, let's start with a bit of Harry Potter. And the Mail here is reporting that Sir Michael Gambon has been fined for jumping a red light. Now, the significance of this is, what did he do in Harry Potter? I'm not quite sure, because I'm not really big on Harry Potter, but allegedly perhaps he played Harry Potter himself. He was fined for jumping a red light, and what is significant about this, his case has been heard behind closed doors under the new secret justice legislation. Now, it was only yesterday that UK Column was warning about this. We've put up an article entitled "Hands Up If You Voted for Star Chambers." But what we are warning about and warning about is the fact that we can clearly see that this treasonous Conservative government under David Cameron are wiping out our liberties. We're removing not only common law courts, but of course we're removing trial by jury. And now, under the lie of austerity, we're again saying, well, we don't really need a jury, we don't need the press, we don't need the public present. We simply need a magistrate or judge in a closed room in order to pass judgment and sentence.
And actually, we're seeing this in practice in many county courts around the country, where the public are, it seems, being denied access to the public galleries in increasing numbers.
That's absolutely correct. This is extremely dangerous, and one of the things that we highlight in that UK Column article, of course, is that we have such upstanding MPs as Kenneth Clarke, for example, saying that if you don't really believe in secret courts, there's something wrong with you. So this very dangerous justice bill pushed through, and we're now starting to see the thin end of the wedge, the slow creep of the fact you're going to be tried by a judge in a star chamber, a closed room. So have a look at that article. There's a bit of historic introduction, and you can actually read where the star chamber originally came from and what it ultimately produced, which is really quite frightening stuff. Well, if that's not bad enough, thank you very much to one of our viewers that pointed this out. It's from Birmingham, and this is just a little document from a children's centre. But what is significant about it is that if you have a look at the detail here, it says we embed a philosophy of safeguarding, and we have an ongoing culture of vigilance and integrated in our philosophy, integrated in our philosophy, and that impinges on everything we do. And they have a designated senior person who is looking after safeguarding. Now, what our viewer picked up is that if you read between the lines on this, this is introducing the Scottish named person scheme by stealth, which is exactly what the UK Column warned of a few weeks ago. So thank you very much to our viewer who sent that through to us. If anybody else has similar information, please do get it to us, because of course it's only by exposing what's going on we can get people to understand it and do something about it. But essentially our human rights God-given human rights are being taken away from us. And you've got some more here, I think, Mike.
Yes, because the Liberal Democrat Party has a petition to stop the Tories abolishing the Human Rights Act. The Human Rights Act, of course, is legislation which infringes on every British inhabitant's God-given and inalienable rights under the rule of law. And to advertise this campaign, they were tweeting out this little picture yesterday. This was late yesterday, and I mean the irony just cannot be missed. So the Tories, they say, should not pick and choose human rights, and yet the whole notion of human rights is exactly that: pick and choose. It begins with a blank sheet of paper. Some humans, what should we call them?
Future leaders.
Yeah, future leaders. We'll call them a group, a clique, a cabal, not really sure what to call them. Anyway, some humans get together and pick and choose what should go on that blank piece of paper. And once complete, they have a list of human rights, yours and mine. Now you may feel that you have a right to do something not included on that piece of paper, or that you may have the right to be treated in a way which isn't described on that piece of paper, but in fact you don't. That's something that you think you should have. It wasn't picked and it wasn't chosen. So I say, let the Tories abolish the Human Rights Act in this country. I prefer my God-given rights. Thank you very much.
And that is a Lib Dem logo on that statement as well.
It's a Lib Dem campaign, to stop the Tories, they say. Now, if you want to get some more background on this, have a look at my article on the UK column, A New Bill of Rights, or Why Human Rights Are So Dangerous. I'm quite happy to have a debate with anybody about this, but just have a read of that article and then get in touch if you like.
And of course, we're seeing these selected leaders. These are the chosen people, very wealthy, very privileged, blue blood. These are the people who are now saying, well, you just need to let us tell you how to run your lives. Don't really worry about it. Don't ask too many questions. If you don't want to bring in secret courts, excuse me, there's something wrong with you.
Well, they're doing much worse than that, aren't they? Because setting aside any religious conversation here, the secular humanism and other campaign groups removing God from government, removing God from the judicial process, and what they're in fact doing is leaving a vacuum in place which we have a human occupying. So in the past we've had Adolf Hitlers and Joseph Stalins of the world, and now we've got the David Camerons of the world who think that they are God and they decide what rights you and I have.
That's absolutely correct. Well, what better example over Cameron playing God than to have a look at his reaction to child abuse. Our UK column has said this over many years. We're going to keep saying it, that child abuse in Britain is the key secret. This is how all of the government policy and dirty dealings is being forced through by blackmail. If we want our country back, which is a statement a lady said to me some years ago, our answer is stay on the trail of the child abuse, because if we can get the lid off that child abuse, we will most certainly get our country back. Well, let's remember David Cameron, so terrified of institutional child abuse coming to the surface that he said this is a matter of national security. He wasn't saying this in a kind way. Of course, he was beginning to panic that the real truth was coming up. Now, Breitbart here, picking up on the story that many people were covering, including the UK column yesterday, and that is the outrageous salary being paid to New Zealand Justice Ms Goddard. She's going to be picking up about $2.5 million for doing her so-called job in the investigation. And this article points out that she's going to be earning 2.5 times that of the Prime Minister, and it outstrips the Lord Chief Justice's salary, the highest paid judge in England and Wales, and he receives £244,665. So who is behind all this? Well, of course, it's David Cameron himself. And why is this man so scared? Well, he is desperate to appoint anybody who he can rely on, we say, to cover up the sheer scale of the child abuse, because if that becomes public, then of course the British government is going to fall, and this is what David Cameron really means by a threat to national security. And remember, while we're talking on this subject, we are led to believe, the public is led to believe, that our security services are so incompetent, so inept, so poorly equipped, that despite the massive budget going into GCHQ, MI6 and MI5, none of these organisations were aware of the penetration of child abuse into Westminster. This, of course, is complete and utter nonsense, and there can only be one answer, that they not only knew, but they were helping cover up to ensure that this corrupt political agenda goes through. So what can we add? Well, if you go to that excellent Breitbart article, have a look at the comments, because really they are most revealing. In the main one here, The person says, whilst it is desperately sad that anyone has had to suffer child abuse, I posit that historic child abuse is not as urgent as getting hold of the people who are doing this now to children who are still children and who are having to endure this stuff today. Now that is absolutely on the button, and of course this is what Goddard's inquiry is really about. It's trying to put out another layer of propaganda that all the abuse is historic, and basically we can just continue to cover this up as something that was happening, but it's not happening now. Have a look at another one, £500,000 per annum plus a great fat bonus and a few gongs if she arrives, when she arrives at the correct findings. So the public here clearly seeing through the outrageous cynicism of this Goddard inquiry by saying, well, of course, what this woman is going to do for her money is simply give the correct findings. It goes on, somebody saying, well, unfortunately, she isn't good because she's apparently been rated New Zealand's worst judge, being scored 63rd out of the 63 judges assessed. Now, I did look for the actual article that spelt this out this morning. I haven't found it. So if anybody can provide us with the documentation behind this comment, I would certainly like to see it. But it goes on. Somebody here says that, remember, she was hired because the British establishment is so perverted and corrupt it cannot be trusted. This is the establishment that are in charge, who would be doing everything they can to destroy evidence of previously suppressed violence and sexual abuse against the children. Public seeing through this scam, which is the Goddard inquiry. And somebody else says here, £500,000 per year is a small price to pay for covering up child abuse. And this is it. Of course, we've no money for the NHS, for schools, for old people, for young people in jobs. But when the government needs money to cover up child abuse, there is a bottomless purse to pay for it. Well, the other person we'd like to mention is Mr. Simon Danczuk. Now, Mike talked about this the other day. What we were saying was it's remarkable how this very brave MP has been viciously attacked to get him to back away from championing a proper inquiry into child sex abuse. So let's just remind ourselves about something which took place a few months ago. Here is the article. Did Prime Minister's advisor try to stop MP linking Britain to claims of child sex abuse? Well, what was this article about? It was this man, Sir Edward Garnier, and Mr. Danczuk said that Sir Edward, who was Solicitor General from 2010 to 2012, had told him that challenging Lord Britain on child abuse would not be a wise move. Now, I don't know what he actually meant by that statement, but I think many people would say that's a veiled threat. Well, where did this lead to? The Telegraph picked up on the same story with a bit more detail. Let's see what they say. The night before my appearance at the committee, that's the committee concerning the Geoffrey Dickens dossier, Mr. Danczuk had an encounter with the Right Honourable learned member for Harborough, Sir Edward Garnier. Sir Danczuk went on to say, after the 10 p.m. vote, he drew me to one side outside the chamber and warned me to think very carefully about what I was going to say the following day. He told me that challenging Lord Britain on child abuse would not be a wise move, and that I might even be responsible for his death as he was unwell. So Danczuk says here very clearly that he warned him. He was warned. And we're going to say that if that's the expression, challenging Lord Britain, sorry, there's a spelling error there, do apologise. That's to do with our budget being under 3.65 billion. The challenging Lord Britain on child abuse would not be a wise move. And it certainly seems that that's the case, we say, Mr. Garnier. So let's have a look at how the papers have dealt with this very brave politician. Well, we've got The Independent here. Simon Danczuk steps back from child abuse after it's left him with depression and a wrecked marriage. Notice the photograph, not a complimentary photograph of Mr. Danczuk, but one that I think you could say has got a dark undertone, as if there's something wrong with him. So let's bring in the next one. Here we are. This is Manchester Evening News. Same sort of thing. His campaign against child sexual abuse has left him with drink problems and depression. And this one here, the Telegraph, well, pretty easy to see where they're coming from. This is an attack on Danczuk's marriage. Labour MP Simon Danczuk in public spat with wife over split. And they decide to put pictures of her from her Facebook page to emphasise their attack on him. BBC, of course, straight in there. MP Simon Danczuk to step back from child abuse campaign. And we'll bring into the centre of that the one we've just covered, which is Edward Garnier. And what did he do? Well, Danczuk says he was warning him a veiled threat, it would appear. And we say, far from receiving widespread support and help from Westminster, Mr. Danczuk has been undermined and ridiculed with the targeted attention of the mainstream press and media, who also fail to report the real plight of the abuse victims. So there's all the mainstream press in there hammering Mr. Danczuk. Not one of these major agencies is actually working to expose the sheer horrific nature of the abuse going on with these youngsters. It comes into the obvious bracket, Mike, doesn't it? Well, we wanted to take this on a step because let's remind ourselves of this gentleman, Geoffrey Dickens, and he was the man who originally had stood up in Parliament to talk about the fact that dossiers had disappeared, and those were the dossiers capable of bringing down the British government because of the widespread involvement in child abuse. Now, in that story was a significant comment. It was talking about break-ins. Mr. Dickens said he did not know the details of what was in the dossier. This is Geoffrey Dickens' son speaking, but it was talked about in the family. Discussions were had. But he says in the middle of this text, around the time that the dossier was handed in, Mr. Dickens' London home and his constituency home were both broken into and ransacked within the same week, but nothing was taken. And they say, we think they were there looking for his evidence. So just remember that. We'll come on to another break-in in a minute, but quite interesting that the moment this man stands up to reveal what's happening with children, his home's broken into. And then here is the BBC, and the BBC don't mess around. What did they do? A character assassination on this man who wasn't even around to defend himself. So here's the article, Geoffrey Dickens, Tea Dances and Dossiers. And let's have a look at how the BBC did it. Well, the first slight, as we've called it, it says the Today programme's James Naughtie, who was parliamentary lobby correspondent in the 70s and 80s, remembered Geoffrey Dickinson's the colourful Conservative MP whose dossier on an alleged paedophile network is now the focus. So he's described as colourful. It's just putting a slight spin. But it gets worse. He then goes on to say, no one can be certain if it was all Geoffrey Dickens' fault that he was not often taken seriously. So the undermining of the character. And the third one, he certainly made it difficult for himself, apparently enjoying the persona of parliamentary buffoon while pursuing campaigns on serious questions. And lastly, the trouble with Twinkle-Toed Dickens, who enjoyed telling tales of his exploits at tea dances, that he never seemed to be quite sure the difference between the trivial and the serious. So the BBC, of course, filled with filth over Savile, then sets about undermining public confidence in this man and his reports of child abuse.
Bastion of balanced reporting there.
Well, it's typical BBC, isn't it? If anybody out there watches UK Column now and you're still watching the BBC, perhaps you'd consider that decision, but also talk to other people. One of the most despicable organisations in the country at the moment with regard to helping the state cover up the abuse of children. Well, that leads us nicely on to the subject of Robert Greene, because we can tell our audience today that former Scottish Procurator Fiscal Eilish Angelini is pursuing the Holly Gregg child abuse campaigner Robert Green for the princely sum of £29,398.76, which she says he owes her in court costs. Now remember that Robert Green has been to prison twice, attempting to get the truth out about the Scottish establishment's involvement in the horrific abuse of Holly Gregg. And this lady, Eilish Angelini, it's a matter of public controversy at the moment what her role was and what she actually did. But we can tell the audience today that the key questions that the public are raising at the moment is, did she or did she not spend public money to pursue her case against Robert Green? Sources north of the border are saying to us that she did. And she, of course, also employed former Levy-Macrae barrister Peter Watson in taking Robert Green through court. Now, Peter Watson himself is embroiled in a fraud case to do with a Scottish hedge fund called Heather Capital. So Peter Watson, her original barristers, had to step down because of proceedings going on at the moment, and he's no longer able to act as a sheriff. So Ms. Angelini is currently being represented by Scottish law firm Brechin, Tyndall and Oates. Now we're just going to say, if you look on the internet yourself, you'll find there's been much written against Eilish Angelini's former barrister, Mr. Watson, Peter Watson, and the little insert there is just some of the articles talking about what he seems to be involved in. We'll bring in this. Sources north of the border allege that Angelini's case against Mr. Green was previously abandoned, and those same sources express concern that Robert Green's evidence and defence documents concerning the Holly Gregg case and the actions with Ms. Angelini were stolen from his house by Cheshire and Scottish Police on the 13th of February 2013. Remarkable coincidence there, Mike, that we've seen documents and evidence taken out of houses, break-ins for Geoffrey Dickens. What do you think? Coincidence?
Well, of course, what this effectively means is that Ms. Angelini is, well, there must be some possibility that she's committing fraud. If in fact it was the public purse which paid for her legal action and now she's going for court costs, is she going to pay that money back if she gets it to the public purse, or is she going to keep it?
Well, that would appear to be a possibility. What seems to be going on at the moment is that she's quite clearly going for Robert Green for repayment of those court costs, which she says Robert Green owes her. But documentation which has been circulating would seem to suggest that the original cases were certainly paid out of public money north of the border. So this is where the public controversy lies. This is where clearly it's in the public interest the more information comes out of the Scottish government. But just as with the efforts of Michael Gove south of the border to ensure that freedom of information requests are blocked, we understand that some of the key requests for information on the Holly Gregg case from the Scottish government have also, I think the phrase is, disappeared into the long grass. Well, there we are. A short advert for UK Column. If you like what we're doing, please consider taking out a subscription or making a donation. We can only do what we're doing with your help, and we would certainly like to expand the breadth of the information that we're putting out, and we can only do that with appropriate support from both our current viewers and hopefully from new members.
Yeah.
So have a think about that. Thanks very much.
Okay, back to financial stuff. Let's talk about it. So the UK labour market statistics are out from the Office for National Statistics today. UK unemployment is up by 15,000, so 15,000 more people out of work. So let's just go through a couple of these. 30.98 million people in work, which is 67,000 fewer than 3 months ago. and it's the first quarterly fall since 2013. Now here's the one: the proportion of the people aged between 16 and 64 in work is 73.3%. That's not really very good, is it? 1.85 million unemployed people. That's 15,000 more than three months ago. And a total of 9.02 million people aged between 16 and 64 who are out of work and not available, either out of work as an unemployed or not seeking or available for work through illness or whatever it is. So that's a pretty spectacular proportion of the population not able to work for whatever reason.
And of course, many who are working, Mike, are on these 0-hour contracts and very low pay.
Absolutely, which is why we've got this need for tax credits, which have just been removed, or cut at least. So comparing March to May 2015 with a year earlier, pay for employees, this is the good news perhaps, is up by 3.2%, including bonuses, and by 2.8% if you exclude bonuses. But let's just have a look at the reality of this situation. So this is from the Resolution Foundation. We've got to thank them for this. A bit of work, because it takes the ONS statistics and put it in a nice graph, which makes it easy to see. And as you can see, the rise in salaries is the sharpest increase for quite a long time. However, if we be a bit more realistic about this and look at where we're actually at, we find that we are only just back at the level that we were at in mid-2004. So this is really nothing to get to write home about or be excited about. And as you rightly say, salaries may be increasing. Inflation claims to be around 0%, but of course we know that that's not really true. There are no decent quality jobs being created at the moment. It's all rubbish jobs being created, it seems.
But the BBC has been broadcasting over the last few days that actually everything is going pretty well with the economy.
Yeah.
So must be true, I suppose.
Well, indeed. Now, Mark Carnage has said that the point at which interest rates may begin to rise is moving closer. So that's another piece of good news, isn't it? He was speaking to the Parliament's Treasury Committee, and he said the point at which once rates begin to adjust, we expect for those adjustments to be at a gradual pace and to a limited extent. Well, that's something, I suppose. Now, we've got to remember that UK rates have been at 0.5% for more than 6 years. And he is saying that the bank would be able to raise rates due to consistent growth above trend, a firming in domestic costs counterbalanced by disinflation imported from abroad.
Just give that to me again.
Okay. He said that the bank would be able to raise rates due to consistent growth above trend, a firming in domestic costs counterbalanced by disinflation imported from abroad.
Disinflation.
Yes, they just make up these words. But anyway, he said, I do think there are a variety of factors that mean that the new normal, certainly over the policy horizon over the next 3 years, is substantially lower than it was previously. He's clearly not speaking English, as you can see.
Well, he is Canadian, so
maybe that explains it.
Give him some credit. He's better versed in lumber and snow and beavers.
Well, possibly. But anyway, his colleague here, this is Monetary Policy Committee member David Miles, has echoed these sentiments in his speech. In fact, it's his final speech as a Monetary Policy Committee member, because he retires from that in August. And he was speaking at the Resolution Foundation, and he said, it's not all good news, is what he said. We're in a much better place than we have been. Unemployment is down to just under 5.5%. Annualized GDP growth has been near 3% for several quarters. Consumer and business confidence has risen sharply over the past year or so. The household saving rate is low and suggests that spending is not being held back by expectations of low near-term inflation. Wages are rising, the availability of finance has risen, and the cost has fallen. Corporate profitability looks solid. So that's all really good news, isn't it?
Yeah,
let's ignore the debt. There is no debt. We have no debt. We can just keep rolling the debt over or something. I don't know what's going on in his mind. But anyway, and he went on to say that given that many of the after effects of the mess of 2008 do seem to have faded, so the after effects of 2008 have faded, there is no debt. That's why they're quite happy to move monetary policy back onto a standard footing, is what they're implying. So let's ignore the debt. Well, here's an example of the outcome of ignoring debt and this kind of insanity. So the NHS is expected to find £22 billion in savings pretty much immediately. Just about all, well, quite a number of the foundation trusts in deficit. So let's forget about, not worry about the government deficit, because that's all being sorted out by the austerity that Osborne announced a week or two ago. We've got, deficit everywhere, which is going to require more austerity. £22 billion the NHS has to find. What does this mean? It means that we've got to kill people, because it doesn't mean finding the odd efficiency here and there, does it? It literally means we've got to kill people.
It's going to mean massive cuts that result in people dying.
Right.
And of course, if viewers and listeners still haven't read the Towards a Million Change Agents, which was a really excellent investigative report into common purposes activities within the NHS, can I suggest you get onto the UK Column website and put Million Change Agents in the search box and have a read of that article.
Indeed. So let's see what Polly Toynbee actually had to say. She said you could call what's happened in the NHS an Adolf. Now, she goes on to say that Adolf is a diving phrase. It's a diving term. It's a front somersault with 3.5 twists, apparently. And she's talking about all the U-turns that are being done with regard to the NHS at the moment. But perhaps she's got another meaning to the word Adolf and is alluding to certain activities that another Adolf that we're aware of did during the 1930s to his health service. But anyway, she goes on to say that the big saving that Simon Stevens, who's the head of the NHS, plans is in massive reconfigurations. The new models of care, which his success regimes will affect over 3 years. That means closures and mergers, which are about as popular locally as an attack of Ebola. Hard to get right. Northwest London's A&E closures and reorderings were calamitous. They are even harder to drive through politically with a small majority. Expect maximum outcry, often from Tory backbenchers, when the scalpel slices their patch. And so she goes on, and really she's hitting the nail on the head here, because these reorderings, as she's calling them, they're basically just closing services or selling them off. And of course, if you sell them off, okay, the taxpayer no longer has to deal with that burden directly, but then the focus becomes profit rather than care.
It becomes profit, but of course the other thing that comes in is that there is absolutely no accountability, as we've been seeing with Sodexo prison in Peterborough that held Melanie Shaw. Private prison, so you attempt to get information, you attempt to get a response, they just tell the public to go away. So the privatisation, the profit angle is one of the dangers, but the secondary one is the fact that they then become complete laws unto themselves.
Now, of course, if the Information Commissioner's Office was doing their job, this wouldn't be the case. And Martin Brighton, who does such a lot of good work in Sheffield, particularly on the common purpose issue, but on other issues as well, has established through the Information Commissioner's Office that where a private company is providing a service which otherwise would have been provided by the public sector, that they do fall under the remit of Freedom of Information Act. But of course, the private companies often are ignoring that fact, and the Information Commissioner's Office doesn't seem to be actually holding them to account on that. So we got to keep some pressure on in that direction, I think.
Well, it comes back to the business of why, of course, Mr. Gove is so keen to help undermine the Freedom of Information Act, because the government never expected the public to use freedom of information in such an intelligent way. So if you're out there after information on the government and what it's up to, get those requests in and then stay on the case. Don't let the organisation get away with fobbing you off. Stay on the case and make those complaints through to the Information Commissioner, at least to the first tier.
Okay, let's move on to Greece again. So civil servants and others to strike in Athens, according to Ekaterina Marini. So that obviously the backlash to the deal is starting to hit. And we've got the public sector union, ADETI, calling a 24-hour strike by civil service workers and other strikes going on at the same time. But I have to say that the commentary on Greece in the mainstream is becoming more and more ridiculous every day. Here's a typical quote. The agreement reached between Greece and its creditors in Brussels early Monday is problematic, but at the same time, the only one that can guarantee the country's Eurozone membership. Why would they want? They don't want to guarantee Eurozone membership, so why would they want to guarantee that? This is nonsense. But I think Peston has to take the biscuit here. Has IMF blown up Greece rescue? Well, we'll come on to that headline in a second. What's he talking about? Well, basically, the IMF has issued an update on on the restructuring of the deal over Greece, and they have. Well, Peston's calling it a blistering attack, and that's pretty much what it is. The IMF is saying that Greek government debt will reach 200% of GDP over the next 2 years, and that they are admitting that situation is nonsense. So let's get back to Peston's headline again, calling it a rescue. Is it a rescue? I mean, what planet is he on?
He's on a common purpose planet, well, Mike. We know where his brain's gone.
Exactly. So how can adding to Greece's debt while at the same time stealing the nation's assets be called a rescue? The debt is uncollectible. Greece doesn't have the productivity to repay it ever. It doesn't have the assets to sell to pay it back. They're going to be stolen anyway. The only thing that's been rescued by this deal is the EU for another few weeks, and without dealing with the debt. And that means actually writing it off. There is no solution to the Greek crisis. And the Greek crisis is only a symptom of the disease anyway. And I think, we've got to reiterate once again that the only way to deal with this debt is to split banks up, Glass-Steagall style, and allow all the casino derivatives, debt, rubbish just to disappear.
Yeah. Well, everywhere we go, money, the love of money, the root of all evil. So let's come back to UK and a favourite subject, which of course is Britain's police, who are consistently saying they've got no money. So let's have a look here at Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire Police, Simon Parr. He's been bellyaching that, of course, his force is having to go through very difficult times because they've got no money. This was also brought up here in the Peterborough Telegraph, where he was actually praised. This man is doing a really good job in ensuring that Cambridgeshire policing is going ahead, and he's doing everything he can to save money and work within his budget. But interestingly, this took place last night at about 9 o'clock. 4 Cambridgeshire police, 2 female officers and 2 male heavies in all the gear, was the description we received, arrived at sheltered housing where an elderly lady who's presently suffering a very badly broken arm was intimidated in order to try and get the information as to where Melanie Shaw was. So this is very similar to what Devon and Cornwall police tried, turning up in force, very aggressive, and demanding to know where a child abuse victim is. Good quality policing, value for money, Mike, or just vicious?
Well, I noticed on that slide you have there, Simon is a member of the Windsor Leadership Trust. So maybe this gives a clue as to what is going on in his mind.
Well, this is exactly why it's there. When we actually had a look at his CV, we were fascinated to see that this man, in addition to running the police for Cambridgeshire, has got enough spare time to be training himself and others to become not just future leaders, but really we're into the top echelon here because we're dealing with the Windsor Leadership Trust. So let's have a look at it. Here we are. Encourage people to go to this website. Notice the little colourful, playful castle there, Windsor Castle. This looks like it's been produced for 4-year-olds, but apparently it's been produced for, well, I think we've got some form of RAF officer there, a navigator by the look of him. But here's one of Britain's top policemen, and what is he doing? He's working with this leadership, which provides transformational leadership programs for senior leaders across all sections of society. So if you're a senior leader with the Windsor Leadership Trust, you're going to get your men out on the streets to intimidate an elderly lady late at night, chasing not an armed criminal, but a child abuse victim.
This organisation set up by Prince Philip, I believe.
It's supported strongly by the royal family, Mike, and people really need to go and see this. And of course, the undertone with Common Purpose, the political charity Common Purpose, very strong indeed. But also pick out the Claw Foundation, which is another very exclusive club training future leaders. Well, having mentioned Common Purpose, let's just remind ourselves of what UK Column News was talking about yesterday. Political charity Common Purpose has been reframing the top 200 civil servants and, we say, the secretive and unaccountable people controlling government. Now, it's only been the UK column that's talked in this depth about what's really been going on in the Cabinet Office, and our headline article from some years ago now was pointing out that it was Francis Maude who was in the political bed with Julia Middleton, concocting deals to get the top 200 civil servants trained. And then yesterday we were talking about this lady, Sue Gray, immensely powerful. She's making all the decisions about what politicians can and can't say to the press, but nobody knows where she gets the power. We've got Sir Jeremy Haywood, taken over from Gus O'Donnell, formerly known as God. Pretty cynical title that, but we understand what people are saying, immense power. And then this is the man that particularly British military sources are saying is the man controlling the Cabinet Office, Oliver Letwin. And remember, of course, he was the man simply throwing away classified documents in the waste paper bin of a London park. So Common Purpose buried at the heart of the British government, training key people. And what are we seeing come out of our government? A government of incompetence, complete breakdown of law and order, public infrastructure. This is not an accident, it's deliberate. How are they doing it? Well, thank you to the person who highlighted this little article. Now, this has come from a personal website, and it's a young lady who is talking about her experiences with Common Purpose Frontrunner course for disabled students, which was done in association with the international bank Santander. And I think I'm right in saying Santander Bank is one of the banks that's had big problems in this toxic market.
Yes.
So just the sort of people to train our youngsters. And in her own words, she says, day one was getting to know you. Day two was learning to lead. Day three, I've got the power. And day four is graduation. So let's look at what this young lady says. On the 7th of July, Jazzy and I set off for Newcastle to attend the Frontrunner Leadership Programme for Disabled Students, run by Common Purpose. She goes on, Common Purpose and Santander are working together to help empower disabled students in higher and further education to be leaders of the future. By empowering these young talents, we aim to increase the diversity of leadership in the United Kingdom. So a failing bank is going to be training our young people. But it goes on. We were based in a very professional feeling conference room where tables have been set up on one side for group work, chairs arranged in a semicircle on the other. For the exercise of the day, we'd all been asked to bring with us an object to represent ourselves that we would present for the group. It was an interesting, if nerve-wracking exercise with creative juices flowing freely. So this lady was scared by what was going on, but she was being told to talk about personal things in front of a group. And then read this, because this is the heart of the Common Purpose agenda. An eye-opening exercise was the task of coming to a group consensus on whether we agreed or disagreed with a number of controversial statements, e.g. same-sex marriage should be legalised and the death penalty is an effective method of crime prevention. Now, what they're doing here, of course, is breaking down personal morality, personal views and values, and replacing it with groupthink, highly dangerous for people with any form of mental vulnerability. This can cause severe damage, but this is cult-type mentality now at the heart of the British government. She goes on to say the day three was I've got the power, was all about power, who has it, how to gain it, how to use it, and they were joined by Nick Swales, Regional Director at Rathbones Investments and Chairman of the Percy Headley Foundation, who spoke to us about where power lies in a city and the role of power within that leadership. And we'll just add a bit more. These are some of the people that were present on the course. Kerry Baker, Marketing Relations Manager at Shared Interest. Beth Hazen, Senior Account Director at Drummond Central. Stuart Burkett, Managing Director at NCJ Media. And so it goes on. Regional Manager for Newcastle Santander. And then in comes the BBC, Michael Wilds, Political Programme Editor for the BBC North East and Cumbria. So these are people teaching disabled students that the values of international banks that have been labelled fraudulent and corrupt should form the role model, and a consensus view should be taken. This is very dangerous stuff, Mike.
And it's interesting that Nick Swales talked about where power lies in a city, because of course we are moving to this core cities model, this replacement of national sovereignty with the idea of city-states. This is coming as part of the devolution and the reframing of the constitution in this country. And they are absolutely interested in running these cities as common purpose type institutions.
And from the earliest days, of course, Common Purpose said in its own material how the aim was to get in and use common purpose trained people to take control of the city. Now, if we just step back, sorry, wrong button, here we go. Let's ram home the fact that, of course, it is David Cameron who is at the heart of this political agenda of Common Purpose. Common Purpose links through to Marxist demos, but we say communitarian. Here it is, a so-called Conservative Prime Minister working on this subversive political and social agenda. And this is really where we get a clear view that David Cameron is a man who wants to destroy British society.
Now, do you think the Common Purpose, this type of leadership, is what you might call soft power?
Absolutely, because most people can't see it. It's subversive. It's a fifth column. Julia Middleton, in her own book, Beyond Authority, waxes lyrical about we need fifth columns to get in there to change society. This is soft power.
Okay, so here's the soft power 30 then. This is a new survey just been released, a ranking of global soft power. And here is the table, if you can see that. Who appears at number 1 is the United Kingdom. So why is the United Kingdom the top in the world for global soft power and global leadership? It's because the UK comes top with an unmatched combination of strong assets across all categories of soft power. The UK does particularly well on culture, digital and global engagement. So of course global engagement means global interference. And Brian, you may have a different view, but my view is that this is why the military is being decimated in this country. Britain doesn't need a strong military because it has a strong foreign office, a strong secret intelligence service, a strong, well-networked NGO infrastructure led by a common purpose. And in any case where we need hard power, we have the USA sitting in the wings, which seems ever willing to go and blow up countries on our behalf.
Well, and of course take the casualties, and as we're frequently saying, when David Cameron stands on the world stage and rattles the sabre for war, the lives he's going to squander are going to be American servicemen and women. There is no question of that. So there we are. It is becoming so obvious that what is going wrong in the country today is not a change in the mentality of British people, but the British public have been changed by this very dangerous and subversive policy which has eaten out the heart of government. And as we've just heard from that piece by the young lady, Common Purpose now directly attacking young people in order to make sure that they only adhere to the consensus Common Purpose view. It is obvious. If we've made an impact with what we've put out today, please share this video. Please do speak to other people, encourage them to watch UK Column. And of course, do get out there and take action. Write, email, talk, shout, but make sure that we actually get the truth out about how this country is being attacked by our own politicians. Thanks very much for joining us. I'll just say before we go that tonight is the UK column meeting at the George Hotel in Plympton, so if anybody's in the local Plymouth area and you'd like to come along, please do. And we're hoping to have Ian Puddick with us. Ian will be down to talk to the column over the next day, so there should be some very good information coming out. And if you can join us tonight for a social beer, please do. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.